What's up, people? What's
What's
going
going on? What's
on?
going on?
Welcome to today's show. I know we're on a little late. I apologize greatly. It's my fault. I don't know what's going on half the time, but I'm Darvell. I'm your host today for the Freedman Collective on this lovely June 8th. And you know what today's show title is? It is the Spin Zone and Spinning. We're going to talk about the media. We're going to talk about its awful influence on the Black community's condition today. And as I said, I'm Darvell, and I'm going to turn it over to my lovely co-host, Ernest. You want to give the people a download of who you are?
Yep, what's going on, y'all? This is Ernest. As always, thank y'all for joining the show, and I'm having this dialogue with us. If you guys feel like joining in this discussion today, just feel like drop a comment, and we'll for sure pick it up.
Hey, what up? Just stepping, man. Couldn't make it last week or last show. The guys held it down. Got a new addition to the family, so just been dealing with that. No sleep, no sleep, no sleep.
Man. Congratulations on that, man.
Thank you. Team No Sleep. So
Jeez.
I'm here today.
Team, man. Sound like you expanding. You got an expansion team.
Right. Like y'all said, I'm trying to come up with a coalition, dog. I gotta, whatever I can do. Keep this fight going to the next generation so we don't have to fight no more.
Well, that is the right way to think about it. So let's pop one into the local beat. We got to talk about something, though, not immediately local to Detroit, but it pertains to Detroit, right, Ernest? We're going to talk about something, some reparations, man?
Yeah. We're going to talk about what they call local reparations in Evanston, Illinois. They were the first city to actually pass reparations, or quote unquote what you call reparations. And I think if you pull up that article, Darville, we can definitely walk them through it. But in essence, what happened in Evanston was, I think all of the social energy from George Floyd and other high-profile police killings, in addition to all of the work that us reparationists have been doing across the country, Evanston was in works with one of the reparations orgs that we're all familiar with, NCOBRA. And I think, some politician, et cetera, tried to go ahead and, let's pass reparations in Evanston. And what happened was they came up with a plan where they took the cannabis tax and tried to use that as a form of reparations. And the game plan was that, $10 million in taxes was basically allocated to Evanston from marijuana sales. Mm-hmm. Of that 10 million, 400,000 was allocated to Black families for reparations. Of that 400,000, only 25,000 can be allocated to each family, which would only result in about 25 families or so being, fed by this reparations bill. So it's not even necessarily enough for the city. On top of that, the houses in Evanston, Illinois are actually all, upwards of 150,000. So, that's just a small dent in what they would have to pay. So in this article here, you got Black residents aren't happy with this reparations bill, which they refer to as more so a housing plan that the government pretty much shoveled out. I know in prior shows we already talked about this, but in this situation, I was told that the residents of Evanston were basically, brought together in a town hall and asked what do they want for reparations. But out of all of their wants, they basically gave them a list of options of what they could choose. And I think housing was something that folks chose, but they also basically denounced it by stating that it's fake reparations and it's not really racial justice. And I agree wholeheartedly. So
yeah,
go ahead, Darville.
I was just gonna say, looking at what is right here in the article, just as you said, the city would pay $25,000 to Black Evanston residents who experienced housing discrimination. The funds would come in the form of coverage for home improvement costs, down payment and closing assistance, and mortgage payments, which is like, does that even speak to the essence of housing discrimination? Like, in the sense that whenever you discriminate or you cut or cross a group of people's ability to acquire land or property, and then for it to accrue value, you got to speak to all that lost potential as well as the principle that was denied, not just this idea that I'm gonna give you a few bucks so that you feel better that I punched you earlier.
Mm-hmm. And go ahead, Sted.
Well, just to kind of piggyback off what Darvell just said, a lot of that just shows you really the intentions of all these different groups or people who have these ideas. Because what essentially, like Malcolm X said, talking about progress, he said, you stick a 9-inch blade in my back and pull it out 3 inches and call it progress. He said, you got to pull the whole blade out and let the wound heal and give it time. And so in that same vein, what you see here is 25,000 is just a number they pulled out their ass. I mean, maybe it was $25,000 years ago, but that can't buy you a house, right? All this stuff that they're trying to get you to cover with that, it can't buy you a house. It isn't going to be a good enough down payment for most houses. It isn't going to be a long-term solution. So what we see is, like we've talked about with reparations, where reparations has to be giving something. It can't be a process. The reparations is not, it cannot be participation in the process. It has to be the end result, because the process is what we were denied. And what that caused us was the inability to gain any of the reward from the process. So you can't give us the process, right? You still making us run the race. Even if you give us a boost, you're making us run the race. We need the finish line now,
Mm-hmm. Yep, you can't advocate for that social justice without actually committing to the social repair part. So
right,
you got to try to make that effort. And I would give an example to say in California they got AB 3121, which is the state bill to study reparations on the state level. With that bill, they have to consider all of the harms that were done and come up with solutions that actually breach or fix the gaps that were created because of these unjust policies. And so one example in California is Bruce's Beach. I don't know if you have heard about it, in Manhattan Beach, which was basically owned by Black people, and they were forced off the land by white folks. And what happened was, the family fought, and they, some other local advocates got together with them, and it turns out that they are in the process of getting back their home. But this property is now worth $86 million in California. So you think about, yes, they could get this home back, but what one person mentioned was that you can't be short-sighted when it comes to this type of justice, because let's look at Evanston, for example. Even if you gave these people $25,000 down payments, it doesn't repair the fact that their family or their communities were cheated out of being able to afford or purchase these nice homes in these areas. And so you can't always forget the component that if they were able to purchase those homes, they would have had 40 to 50 or 60 years of the income from that property, which is significant. And so when any housing plan that they claim as reparations, if it doesn't come with the property income that you would have had if you could have obtained a home or if you would have had a home, then it's a farce. So I just add that in there.
No, that's a good one. Go ahead, Stephen.
And just as somebody who's been looking to buy a home for like a year and a half, 2 years, when you look at 25,000, so Ernest, you said it was the average price was like 150. So 20% down payment is 30,000. That's not enough for a down payment. And what that causes is a need to buy mortgage insurance, which does nothing for the buyer. All it does is, if let's say the buyer should happen to default on a mortgage, the mortgage company can claim that insurance, and then they'll be reimbursed for the losses of that house. So it does nothing for the if you don't have a 20% down payment for 30 years, but you continue to pay your mortgage on time, you still got to pay that mortgage insurance. You see what I'm saying? So it's still it's not, even to call it a Band-Aid on a knife wound. It really belies the situation, because it's more intense than that. You see what I'm saying? And so you're not going to be able to use it for down payment and mortgage help and XYZ, because it's not even enough for a legitimate down payment if the houses are actually only 150,000. Because even if they are, what I've been seeing and what I've been looking at based on national numbers, you see that houses are selling usually 10 to 15,000 over asking, and a lot of people are paying cash. Right, 1 in 5 homes is being bought by a real estate investment company, right? So you can't compete. And why do they do this? They do this because they understand the value in home ownership for them as a corporation, and the value in that home ownership as it pertains to the leverage of the average home buyer. So if you can't afford to buy a house, you got to live somewhere. You either got to rent a house or rent an apartment, right? And so if you want, like me, you want a bigger family, you got a bigger family, you want to rent a house, you're going to be renting that house that you can't buy. And they make sure that it's out of reach for buying, but it's just out of reach for you to save money to eventually buy it. And so you can afford to continue to work, and pay rent. And that's the situation you see. I mean, it's crony capitalism is the, both, on both sides. That's what it is. It's crony capitalism.
Yeah, that's my biggest fear when it comes to the entire space of home ownership and the Black community, is that there's a majority subset of our community that, has home ownership aspirations and even has good paying jobs. But when we talk about when we say good paying for the Black community. But when we talk about the racial wealth gap, what we got to realize is that because there are so many who can, it makes it that much more harder for those who can't, because they move that bar, they move that goalpost higher and higher. And that's why the racial wealth gap is so important to understand. People don't understand. They think that, oh, well, I'm doing okay. I got enough money for me to live comfortably. You don't have enough money to live as Americans live. You have enough money to live as Black Americans live. And that's a different type of level of comfort. You don't even understand what these other people are doing. So when we talk about this reparations program, it has to kill that disparity between the Black community and rest of America, where we're not having that conversation anymore. So just as I'm showing on the screen here, this quote directly from that Black Enterprise article about the Black residents rejecting reparations. This is a housing voucher program, not reparations, and calling it that does more harm than good. And that comes straight from Kristen Mullen and Dr. Sandy Darity in an op-ed that they done for the Washington Post, when they kind of talked about this idea of using these Evanston reparations as a bedrock or a foundation, if you will, for what other cities can do, right? Because we're looking at that happening right now in Detroit, right, Ernest?
Yeah, and I mean, I think as a lot of these cities, some of the constituents of those cities, residents, as they start seeing plans like Evanston, they're thinking, why can't I get a $25,000 loan on top of whatever we get? And so they often say we need to get city reparations. But what you don't understand is that just like with Evanston, these are taxpayer dollars that are basically going towards what they call reparations. And ultimately for the city of Detroit, I think it's a little deeper, just off the fact that they're trying to incorporate reparations by way of their charter, which would only mean that the citizens of Detroit will be paying directly for their reparations, which means if you guys want better roads, then you will be paying more all around the board. You want better schools, you're going to be paying more for it. And then they'll say, we'll give a voucher out to some of the families using your own tax money. So that's not necessarily reparations.
That's beautiful.
And the optics of an 80% Black city paying reparations to itself for crimes that it didn't commit against itself is mind-blowing. You know what I'm saying?
That's
no Black resident in Detroit is responsible for the institution of slavery or the repercussions of, for example, eminent domain, which was one of the reasons why they took Bruce's Beach, or covenants like they have in Chicago. You know what I'm saying? And so even like what Darvell just said before, what you said, Ernest, about not being able to afford to be an American, you can afford to be a Black American. When you look at the housing industry, I mean, it really is, it is perfect. It's the perfect system for corruption, for money laundering, for all that kind of funny business, because there's no law that requires you to take an offer from someone. There's no law that requires you to set a certain price. There's no law that requires a certain appraisal value based on certain characteristics or criteria. None of that happens. And so when a person has cash, if a house is on the market for $100,000 and I got $300,000, I can pay you $300,000 for that house. And what that does, and this is what happens here, what that does is that drives the tax rate up, because now the property values go up in that neighborhood. And so if you can't afford the taxes, you lose your house. And that's the way that these things are happening in the city, where the gentrification is happening so swiftly. And so we can't afford, you can't afford to be an American. You can't afford to be American by any stretch. even I think it was in Indiana, a black lady, her home value doubled or something. The appraisal value doubled. She had a white friend sit in her home while it was being appraised, and the value doubled. You know, those are the kind of things that you can't, not that you can't, that the government up to this point has shown it is unwilling to address. And I mean, you know, even when we look at this AAPI bill, it just shows you that black people, black voters, black citizens, the descendants of freedmen, the people who built this country for free, are an afterthought to the wide majority of political power, to institutional power, and to the elites. We are an afterthought. We have to understand that. We are an afterthought. And when we start to take that control, that's when we'll start getting respect. But to play the game as it is played, as if we are fully invested citizens, it ain't going to work. It's not going to work to our benefit.
No, I'm tired of people acting like we got all our chips on the board and we out here making power moves. You know, they love to live vicariously through the celebrities who actually are holding up a deck and a bell to keep them under control. Listen, we're not here with no tinfoil hat stuff. You can tell that I'm not even coming with the energy I usually come with on this, because we done told you about 50 million times what's going on, but most people choose to just stay in the space of what's the sunken place, right? The black, what is that movie called?
Get Out.
Get Out, yeah. And people want to be in the sunken place. I just watched this movie last night. Soul is an animation from Disney and Pixar.
Yeah, that Pixar.
You know, yeah. You seen that with Jamie Foxx as the lead voice? What?
I didn't see it yet, but I heard about it.
Yeah. It was
I don't have Disney Plus.
Basically, the main character goes into this alternative universe, which is supposed to be the before life. You know, before you are born into the world, there's a space where they give you personality and they give you characteristics and things that are going to make you who you are in the world. And then there's also the afterlife. When you pass away, there's this place where you get sent off to, I don't know what they called it, the abyss or whatever. But what was interesting is in the before world, they tried to make it, or not tried to make it, they spoke of people who go into deep trance, who go into deep focus, like a musician or a writer or someone who goes into a space of eminent focus to be in their craft, in their zone. And they really gave this a real three-dimensional box that these people would move into theoretically, or in a sense, whenever they got into the zone. And there was a place where you could get caught up very badly if you got too deep and you didn't have a gravity anchor back into real life. And so it was interesting because this is kind of where people like to live, in the same imaginary, not that was that imaginary, but in an imaginary space where we have the ability to just move around and do things. I'm going to show you guys something, but Ernest, what else do you want to touch on regarding these reparations before I show this clip?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I ain't got, nothing much to add on here. I think you guys are wrapping it up just well. So if you have that clip, you could play it, Darvell.
Yeah, so I want to show this because, I mean, this is not to put anyone on blast, but, actually, I won't show it. But I made a post on Facebook about yesterday, about 24 hours ago. And I said the Black community will never catch up and be competitive without reparations. So several people, liked the post already and whatnot. And I think it was even shared. I don't know who shared it. But the issue is that, there are people still out there who strongly disagree. And when we have enough, I'm not saying people aren't entitled to their opinions, but it's like, I guess you can be entitled to your opinion, just like people thought COVID wasn't real, right? Yeah. So I think
that entitled to your opinion, but you can't deny the facts. And so Martin Luther King, he said it best. He said, if a man entered a race 300 years after his fellow runners, he would have to perform extraordinary feats to catch up. And that's the facts.
Mm-hmm.
So we would have to all become LeBron James. We want to catch up with the white people.
Well, go ahead, Stan.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, our governor, she's pretty hard to catch. I heard she was flying all over the place up here in Michigan.
Oh, man. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, we can pivot to that then. It's all good. So this is these articles, it's two articles, but that I pulled from notes. But the article that we're going to just have up is from Charlie LaDuff. They're both by Charlie LaDuff, but they're written in Deadline Detroit, which is like a grassroots kind of underground local publication, and it's entitled LaDuff. Whitmer no, that's the wrong one. LaDuff, come clean, Governor Whitmer. Who flew from Michigan to Florida with you? And it was published May 17th, 2021. And so basically, to give you some backstory, she took a flight on March 12th, which is a Friday, through the 15th, which is a Monday, to Florida. She claimed it was to help her ailing father. Her father has some kind of severe illness, chronic illness, and she went down to help him in Florida. It was discovered April of 2021. I'm not sure of the exact dates. But where she flew to is actually a place that's located where her father has a summer home or a winter home, in Florida. Her father was previously, I think his name is Dick Whitmer or Richard Whitmer. He was previously the CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. So he's not broke or poor or any of those types of things. And so the part that makes this compelling is that she requested the use, apart from the fact that she took the trip at all, is that she requested use of a private plane owned by a group of Detroit businessmen who shared this plane. And the business owners do business in the state and for the state. And so in the article, one of the members who owned the plane, speaking in confidentiality, said they wondered why she wanted to use their plane instead of just chartering one on her own. And then he said, we couldn't really say no to her. She's the governor. We don't want those kind of problems. Okay. And so there's been Charlie LaDuff is like, he used to work right for the New York Times. He wrote for the Detroit News. He's a graduate of the University of Michigan. I don't know if he got a kind of a controversial past a bit. He was found to have plagiarized at New York Times. I've read some of it. It's kind of, it's not as salacious as it sounds, but people try to use that as a knock against his credibility as an investigative journalist, or they try to use that as a knock against his intentions. Okay, so prior to going, when it was discovered that she went, her team tried to say she had been vaccinated before she went. She wasn't. Okay. They also lied about the length of the trip. They said it was 2 days. It was actually 4 days, the 12th through the 15th. Okay. And 2 weeks after she had got back from the trip, she told the Michiganders, she told all of us to avoid going to Florida because there was a spike in the UK variant of the coronavirus. Okay. And then two top health officials went down there anyway. All right.
Well,
so getting to the flight. Okay. She claimed that she only used this flight. She purchased the hitchhiker's fare, meaning there was already going down there. So she just paid $8.55 from this fund that she has. It's the fund is called Michigan Transition 2019, and it was founded in 2018 for her and what's his name, Garland Gilchrist, as a transitional fund, right? And so it's only supposed to be used for official business, even though no business expenses were filed for the flight. So as far as we could tell, it doesn't appear to have been used for official business, and it's a potential IRS violation, because it is a 501c4 organization and they're using funds that are tax deductible for non-tax deductible purposes. The FAA also says the charter was operated illegally because they're not licensed to charter flights. So on top of that,
she can't pay the hitchhiker's fee to him.
Right. You can't pay the hitchhiker's fee. You can't charter a flight with and the thing that makes this even worse, this is kind of the same thing that got Kwame in trouble, right? This kickback and taking all this money and donations and stuff under the table. This is what landed him in federal prison. And so, just to interject a little bit before I keep going, what happens in these situations? Because like we talked about this before with Tim Scott saying that America's not racist, and then Kamala Harris saying America's not racist. And so people say, oh, Tim Scott is a coon or a Tom or a sellout. But when it comes to Kamala Harris, they say, well, she's playing politics. And so what you see is like when you have people who you accept are on your side, right? They're on your team. You make excuse for their bad behavior. And when a person is not on your side, you make excuse to destroy or denigrate those people, no matter how much good or no matter how much legitimate, mistakes they make. You just choose to destroy them. So the fund was set up in 2018, like I said.
Mm-hmm.
And so in March 2019, 2 months after the inauguration for governor, the fund had a balance of $1.5 million, which is weird because this is a transition. You shouldn't have had more money than you needed, or you shouldn't have money left over. You should have given that donations back. Nobody does that, but that doesn't mean it isn't the right thing to do, right? And they said, and still, from March 1st to April 30th of 2022 or 2019, they were still accepting donations. They totaled $246,000. They received $50,000 from Chemical Bank, $50,000 from a super PAC linked to the Michigan Credit Union League, $12,500 from the Association of CPAs, $10,000 from Comcast and Charter, $25,000 from AT&T, and then Charter gave $25,000 more in 2020, and then the Credit League gave $50,000 more in July.
Man,
and the contributions had stopped until she had repaid the $855 that she had got from her trip. She just recently paid it. Okay, so the total expenditures of the group from March 1st, 2019 to April 30th, 2021 is $1 million. $412,000 of that is office administration. No legitimate itemizing. Consulting fees is $209,000, but no consultants are named. She gave a gift in January 2021 of $20,000. No indication of who the gift was for. She gave, and then the flight. So now, getting to the flight. The flight, she took $27,000 to charter this private flight with no accompanying business expenses, besides a $43.96 office administration fee. Somebody also traveled for $5,000 in July of 2020. Okay, so all that breaks campaign finance law. That's number one, right? That's number one.
Man, come on, big
right. But like when you look at it, just looking at the situation, her father, like I said, he was a wealthy guy. He was the CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield Michigan. Like in May, right?
Oh yeah.
When the article was written, it's called Great Lake News Network. They also do news. It's mentioned in the article. They linked to in the article. Her father was in a Lansing area mall getting into a brand new Tesla.
Oops,
so he made this miraculous comeback.
I thought he was in the home. I thought he was in the old people's home.
Exactly. She did this press conference talking about it. She's all defiant and indignant. Oh, I'm not going to answer more questions about my personal life. And she says that she can't talk about the travel because of, fear for her safety, because the supposed plot against her life from these people. And so what it does, it gives her the opportunity to really just sweep everything under the rug. And then so many people are sycophants because she's a Democrat and Trump supposedly didn't like her, that they just willing to look everything. They're willing to turn the other way on everything. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Her father was a CEO. Where in the world, where in America can you go to a nursing home and cook and clean up for somebody and you don't work there?
And somebody
I'm surprised that, like Darvell was saying, living like a Black American versus an American, especially when that was the CEO of one of the top companies in the healthcare industry. So, she was quick to use.
You weren't vaccinated.
Taxpayer.
She wasn't vaccinated.
Not even taxpayer dollars, but donations for the campaign
to pay illegal campaign funds.
She has thousands and thousands of dollars. You know what I'm saying? Her net worth of at least $1 million.
And she wasn't vaccinated. Right. And so we know before, when the pandemic first happened, her husband called that boat launch to, hey, I'm the governor's husband. Can I
so how about that though? Like, she wasn't even vaccinated, and she has been encouraging all of this. She should have been the first person to get the shot. So these politicians not leading by example, and then you stack that on top of the fact that in Arizona they faked the shots. The syringes was already empty, and the doctors who was claiming to get the shots, they just was pulling. They put the syringe in. Nothing was pushed in.
Oh so, wow! I didn't know about that.
It's questionable. Especially Gretchen Whitmer is telling us to take for the kids to get these shots, and you want to get on flights and haven't even been vaccinated. And have been this whole year.
and you do it in this covert way, hoping that there would be no paper trail, no traffic. You be able to, because you can fly on Delta, dude. It's a hub here. You can fly on Delta. We go to Florida.
Hey,
You can fly on a private jet. We go to Florida.
She said she wasn't trying to sit next to lowly people.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Her husband was trying to get her boat. Wait. So then look. Remember the picture of her with 12 other people in that bar?
Yeah.
None of them wearing masks at a restaurant.
Did that happen before this or after this?
Before.
I believe it was after this. Because this was in March.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like, time and time again, you flout, and we see politicians, Gavin Newsom, Cuomo in New York, Gavin Newsom in California. You see people flout their own COVID laws, their own restrictions. Chris Christie, remember he shut down that beach?
Yeah.
Who's my man?
Just like,
who's my man with the Mexico with the daughter?
Terry Crews.
Yeah, boy.
But see, and a lot of people aren't in this camp, but he don't support the lockdown. So I mean, it's bad that he did it because everybody was doing it. But it's worse when you make everybody do it. You claim to support this policy, and then you don't practice the policy. Like Ernie said, you're not even getting a shot.
Hey,
you want me to get a shot, and you're not getting a shot?
What's the worst thing about that though? Like, what tool did they use to kind of get everybody to think we're supposed to get the shot?
The media. Can I say it? That's what we're talking about today.
I think we already touching upon COVID, right? And we talking about all these rules being broken that were supposed to be followed. We got the CDC throwing their hands up in the air to all of these rules and parameters they set up months and months ago, and now all of that doesn't mean anything.
Apparently not.
So I heard there was some emails that came out. Stead, you want to go ahead and kick us off a little bit?
Tell me about these emails, Stead, man. Who, you got an email? What you got emails about? He was involved.
BuzzFeed put in a FOIA request from Dr. Fauci for his emails. Like government employees.
Oh yeah, I didn't know that was a freedom of information to get the emails.
Yeah, well, see, that's why the whole thing with Hillary Clinton's private server was a big deal because she was handling government business on a private server. You can't FOIA that. Yeah, you can't FOIA her private stuff. And so they tried to make it like it was no big deal, but it is a big deal. If it wasn't a big deal, it wouldn't be a law. But so they subpoenaed, or not subpoenaed, they FOIA'd his emails. And they were heavily redacted. So they weren't just like completely great. And a lot of them, I mean, it was just, there were people emailing him to get advice about what they should do as it pertains to the virus. Let me see if I can pull some up right quick just from a BuzzFeed, because they're the ones who actually FOIA'd the emails. So here's from Mark Zuckerberg. It says, Tony. So this is from March 15th. So right at the height of when we were just finding out how serious the pandemic was. I wanted to send a note of thanks for your leadership and everything you're doing to make our country's response to this outbreak as effective as possible. I also wanted to share a few ideas of ways we could help get your message out. But I understand you're incredibly busy, so don't feel the need to reply unless these seem interesting. This isn't public yet, but we're building a coronavirus information hub that we're going to put at the top of Facebook for every 200 million Americans, 2.5 billion people worldwide, with two goals. One, make sure people can get authoritative information from reliable sources. And two, encourage people to practice social distance and give people ideas for doing this using internet tools. This will be live within 48 hours. As a central part of this hub, I think it would be useful to include a video from you because people trust and want to hear from experts rather than just a bunch of agencies and political leaders. This could be done in a number of formats. If you're open to it, probably best would be recording a Q&A where you answer people's top questions, but we'll be open to other formats too. I'm also doing a series of live stream Q&As with health experts. So I'm not going to read it. It says finally, and then it's redacted. So then that's the end of the email. And so he says back, let's see. No. This is another email. And so a lot of them are really in the same vein, right? Kind of mundane, people asking, hey,
how can I keep safe, man? You got anything?
Yeah, how can I keep safe? But there are a couple emails from other health professionals, doctors, like one from either Harvard or Yale, where he's, and it might be, So it's from Greg Gonsalves in March 2020. So it's down just a bit. March 8th, 2020. So this is 7 days before that. And I think we didn't talk about coronavirus in America or the U.S. until the 11th or the 12th. My birthday is March 11th. So it was something, because I know me and my wife and my family, we were in Vegas visiting my parents. So I had gone out there for my birthday and I had vacation. So it wasn't, it was around after that. And so he says, "Dear Tony, Bob, and Deb et al." So he's talking about
I want to find
the different the different doctors involved with the coronavirus. "We are desperate for advice as a subject. The AIDS experts among you know me well. We've been adversaries, then colleagues, for over 30 years. They also know I can't keep my mouth shut, which is a virtue and a failing, depending on the context. There are thousands of people waiting for advice from our federal government on broader social distancing measures in light of the fact that our failure in early testing and surveillance means the coronavirus is likely already spreading in our community. If you thought the ire of AIDS activists 30 years ago was tough, the anger now spreading among researchers, scientists, clinicians, and activists is going to be a conflagration. All we see is genuflection in word and deed from most of you to a White House that wants this all to magically go away. Yes, I know you're all doing your best, and behind the scenes, our federal government is hard at work. For those I know, I don't doubt your commitment to public service, but time is running out. We need vocally unequivocal leadership now that offers real guidance to communities about what to do, what might happen next. Your own legacies will be defined by this moment. What you do and what you don't, what you shy away from saying because you fear your jobs or your short-term fortunes. In the eyes of the president, the status quo is untenable. It's going to get people killed by this virus, Greg. So Fauci replied, and he was upset. Greg, I'm surprised that you included me in your note. I genuflect to no one but science and always speak my mind when it comes to public health. I have consistently corrected misstatements by others and will continue to do so. I am including 2 links from Sunday shows today where I am extremely explicit and forceful. I will be happy to chat with you about this. And so he links 2 articles.
Man, okay.
And so Greg comes back saying some more. But what ends up happening, you see that some of the emails have, so a lot of people may not remember early on, Fauci did a 60 Minutes interview and they said, "Hey, are you a mask? Should people be wearing masks?"
Yeah,
and he says, that. No, nobody really should be wearing masks. It's not helpful right now. There's a fear that if you touch the mask, you'll get stuff on you and it might make you more sick. We don't need to wear a mask right now. It wouldn't be helpful. In these private emails, you find out that he thinks masks are helpful, right?
Did he think masks were helpful early on at the same time he was telling people on TV mask?
Yes.
So, I'll play devil's advocate to this to the degree, because I think what happens is, and I don't know this, and maybe you're going to go into it, is you got to understand, well, not you, I'm not explaining it to you, but there's this idea that when they put words out, they need to be as concretized, stable, and long-lasting as possible. So even if you are on the border of saying we need to shut down the country, you got to have everybody behind the scenes on that same tone. You might even have to have the governors already dialed into this message before you can put it out. So I bet you, although he thinks these emails may show a lot of background work going on, right? Like, yeah, masks would be helpful, and they're still greasing the skids before they can say it publicly. Do you think there was a lot of greasing the skids? Or was it basically deceit until something else?
Well, I believe that he legitimately thought he was doing a good thing by telling people not to wear masks. And here's why. Because his name is Mehdi Hasan. He's a British journalist. I think he used to be with The Guardian or the Daily Mail, but now he's like with MSNBC or something. And Mehdi Hasan kind of, pressed him in an interview. And, UK journalists kind of press when they're giving interviews. And he says, well, the reason we were doing it, and Fauci has said this a couple of times, well, the reason we were telling people not to wear masks is because we didn't know if we'd have enough for the healthcare workers, the frontline healthcare workers. And so we didn't want people going out buying all the masks up.
I remember that, yep.
Now, the issue with that is, and that could very well be a concern you have, legitimate concern. But then tell people, like you told people eventually anyway, to just make their own mask or wear a T-shirt or a bandana or a scarf, because that's what most people ended up doing. For a very long time, most people just covered their face with something. And even today, you got people wearing the ski masks, the balaclavas. They're not wearing masks. They're just wearing whatever.
Right.
And so that's the issue. Because I worked with a lady who did not wear a mask and would refuse to wear a mask, like vehemently, because she said they don't work. And everybody wearing a mask is an idiot because they don't work anyway. They already said they don't work. And so you run the risk of causing more people more suffering because you got a legal expert coming out saying we don't need to wear masks. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, let's tie it to the show title then instead. So what we got going on here is we got one of the top experts going back and forth. We got the CDC going back and forth for not knowing necessarily what the hell they doing or what's what. And then you got the news media doing what necessarily.
They're covering for them. They're covering for them under any circumstance. They're covering for them, right? And that's the issue. See?
Yeah.
Now,
one thing I wanted to point out is to the audience is that you all should, at this point, if you're an American, you should be aware of the power of the media. And I think, Black folks, we have a good idea of how powerful they are. But just think, if we all started to believe to wear the mask and, distance 6 feet based on what the media fed us and what we believe from our top experts and politicians, what's to stop the media from continuing to push other narratives that aren't necessarily as helpful as this COVID initiative? And one example I would give is if we're looking at the racial history of this country, the media has always spent one narrative about Black Americans as it ties to hate, etc. And I would say, most of the masses just believed in the message that they received. So the same thing can be said with the COVID, with what the CDC does when they roll back the guidelines. Us as the masses, getting force fed.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, we do expect the information that comes to us to be somewhat accurate. And I think that it's harder for people to accept the idea that it is inaccurate because at the end of the day, if the news that you are most able and easiest to obtain, if that's not the stuff you should be listening to, then what do you listen to? And then you start going off into unbeaten paths that apparently are lined with people, but not that many people. And yet you're supposed to be, dousing yourself in information from these alternative sources. When, you've been trained as a child inherently to not believe in something that most people won't believe in, right? It's the power of the groupthink. It's the power of momentum of people, psychology, right? So that's why we talk about Black news and, independent media needing funding, needing its ability to legitimize itself by putting itself out there and being competitive against the established media news sources, right? And so when you don't have the funding, when you don't have the investment from corporations to put ads in your media pages, you lose that. And so you fall wayside or you fall victim to the media that's controlled by essentially the establishment, essentially people who don't have your best intent at their heart.
And see, and what this does too is it exposes a deeper issue as it relates to this virus, because the government engages in, and I talked about this a little bit in a previous episode, gain of function research. The research is where the government studies viruses that are, organic, natural viruses, and they'll take them in labs and they'll manipulate them to make them more deadly or dangerous, more contagious, in order to try to create cures for them, in order to make better medications and vaccines for us for just the regular stuff. The issue is those can get loose and they get out into the environment and they wreak havoc on us. And so early on, Trump said, "Oh, this was made in the lab," and kind of after he, pretty much the Trump administration can be defined as soon as Trump said something one way, Fox usually was in support of what he said, and then MSNBC, CNN was completely contradicting what he said. And so, like he said, this was made in a lab, and he didn't really have any evidence. He was more trying to protect himself by claiming that, hey, it's not my fault. It's out of my control. But there's now become greater evidence to show from the Wuhan Institute of Virology that this really might be a lab leak. And so, if we would have said this 2 months ago, YouTube would take this video down. Facebook would take your post down. Twitter would flag your account. But now, there's been emails stuff saying between Fauci and stuff. Well, hey, Mark Zuckerberg, we're not going to do that anymore because we don't really know, right? We don't really know where it's coming. And so this is a thing like with the groupthink and the pressure. And if you just say, hey, I don't know, man, I don't know. We don't know. Nobody knows. Fauci don't know. Trump don't know. Joe Biden don't know. You look like a monster or a lunatic. People look at you like, oh, you just one of those anti-vaxxers. And it's just like, man, I just want more information. We all should just want better information before we put something potentially dangerous into our bodies. But people aren't doing that. They want to marginalize your voice or your perspective. They want to ostracize you when you don't participate in groupthink, when you aren't just jumping right behind, everybody else. And so what that does is it creates a situation where people who are legitimately good faith actors trying to figure the truth are silenced out of fear, and misinformation, bad information, bad intentions are able to just excel and grow because that's the narrative that they want to push. And that's the nature of the propaganda we're talking about. You know what I'm saying?
So Stay, let's stop it right there then. For like tying this into our next topic, because you already mentioned that it's been confirmed that now this virus has originated out of China and out of Wuhan. I guess right. Based on the packaging or whatever, the way they don't like how this guy who used to be our president used to talk.
Right.
Based on the packaging, because he said the Kung flu virus or the China virus, that was racism, that was hate, that was, this is what leads to hate crimes, and this leads to xenophobia and people being killed in the streets based on these lies being spread. And now it turns out these lies are true. Now it turns out Facebook won't ban you for posting this, or they won't say this is stop the AAP I hate, which we all seen a few, I think a month or two ago when they did the mass spread, awareness. I'm like, wow, I mean, shit, they didn't do this for black people even after they killed Trayvon, after they killed Tamir Rice, little kids.
Right. That's a very important
we can do that for them. So, I mean, this is a good, I feel like this is a good segue into talking about this Asian hate crime bill, which we could all attribute to Trump and the media spin on the mass increase in hate crime and violence against Asian Americans because they were somehow being blamed as individuals for this virus.
Right.
Yeah.
Personally, I've never blamed the Asian for the virus, but if it came from China, I will say it's
came from China.
Originated from China. It's just America. If we made a disease and it spread across the world, people could say that's the American disease. And
so would you say today, just on a side note, would you say that today, if we made a Clubhouse room entitled "COVID came from China," how long would it last, and what would happen?
I mean, you're gonna get reported, but I make it like, hey, that's the problem with these nuances of people trying to tell us about hate or racism, is that they think just because they're offended by the words that you use in that's necessarily racism. Like, and that's not equivalent. It's not the same thing.
It's not. I mean,
well,
but go ahead.
And so, I mean, even like what Ernest is saying, I think that would be controversial, and they might try to flag you. But so long as you were able to back up what you were saying with facts and evidence, and you weren't just making conjecture or using any kind of racial tropes to try to justify your perspective, you should be in the clear. You see what I'm saying? Now, the gray area of this is that the U.S. government still funded these gain of function research in China. So the disease did come from China, but it came from China with U.S. intervention. So, I mean, it's a real long, murky story about how Fauci fits into that, too, because he had investments and stuff. Him and Bill Gates talked a lot, and we talked about that, Ernest, about how Bill Gates had a big hand in the vaccine rollout. And for example, with the AstraZeneca vaccine, which Oxford and AstraZeneca were putting together in the UK, they were going to release it for free so that everybody could just mass produce the vaccine. Bill Gates called them and told them not to do that. And they didn't. They eventually patented the vaccine and restricted its access. So, I mean, Fauci is not a good guy here. And so this is like we talked about yesterday on the phone, the false choice narrative where it's got to be this or this. And we have to get out of that mindset. because Fauci can be a bad guy in this situation in some aspects. Now, maybe, not specifically with the masks, but just in general with how he's handled this virus, the way that he wants the virus to be patented and the vaccine to be patented and restricted. And the way he's fine with Bill Gates kind of having this control over a public health measure. Yeah. But Trump can be bad too, or Biden can be bad too. You see, it don't have to be a situation where this is bad, so this is good, or this is good, so this is bad. Maybe we just, between a shit sandwich and a shit smoothie, and that's all you got. There isn't no sugar nowhere in between them. And so that's where we are. We have to understand that. America is such a bad country in the way that it applies its domestic and foreign policy that usually if something bad is happening around the world, we got our hands in it in some way. So and simultaneously, China might be bad too.
Go ahead, Dario.
Well, I was going to say, when we talk about America's hand and everything, America has its hand in the need. In a way, if we say, like, what do they say, the branch or the fourth establishment of the United States, the fourth branch of the U.S. government, the media has so much sway.
Fourth estate, yeah.
Fourth state. It's literally the media, probably under direction from the government or establishment of that sort, that created the environment in truth that led to the passage of the Asian hate and the Asian anti-hate or anti-Asian. What? How do they call it? I don't
it's know.
Called for Asians. But so that's the thing. What I'm saying is that basically it wasn't a thing on this level until the pandemic. Then all of a sudden there needed to be a fervor around it. And you know what? What's really crazy is that they didn't have data to back that up, did they? They didn't really.
They got data, but we can look at it right now.
Relative to anybody else in this country.
I'm gonna share my screen real quick, but we can look at basically, the media played a role in getting this bill accelerated. The same way the media played a role in getting all of the crime bills for Black people accelerated and ruining millions of Black families. So when you think about the media, you got to understand the role that they could play. But let me go ahead and go to this. This is the. Can you see my screen, Darrell?
Yep, we're up. Just go ahead and go full screen.
So this is the Stop AAPI Hate National Report. So if you go to stopaapihate.org, you'll find this information. Now, I know in previous shows we already shown you guys the FBI statistics on in America as of 2019, and what we've seen was, of course, Black people have the highest number of incidents. But through this reporting apparatus, the Asian community, or the AAPI, which is an organization made up of other Asian ethnic groups, they all came together. And over a time frame of March 19, 2020 to March 31st, 2021, they reported 6,603 incidents of potential hate crimes, or I guess discrimination. When you look at what type of discrimination or what they reported, verbal harassment was 65.2% of all of the incidents reported. Shunning was 18.1%. What is shunning? I.e. the deliberate avoidance of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. So when you hear this word shunning, what people need to understand is that Black Americans have been shunned in this country for probably about 400 years at this point. And, the reality,
we just talked about it with the housing.
We just gave that example with the KKK, when the guy had the flag on the house right next door. You know what I'm saying? What do you call that?
That's Detroit today. That's Warren, right?
That was months ago. But I'm saying, even with the housing in Evanston, right? Yeah. If you barring people from buying homes, you don't want people in your neighborhood because they drive your property value down. Yeah. What do you do? And verbal harassment?
Physical assaults, 12.6%. The third largest category, they say. So just
only well, I'm not saying that physical assault is okay, but that's way down there from the other stuff.
Right.
Civil rights violations, workplace discrimination, refusal of service, and being barred from transportation account for 10.3% of incidents.
So I hope they're not saying these things are the underlying drivers of the bill. When
it was the underlying driver.
Yeah, and the verbal harassment part is what kills me. Because I don't know if you guys watch soccer at all, but Mexico and the U.S. soccer team had a match like 2 days ago.
Yeah.
And they were talking about how Mexican fans was throwing garbage at U.S. players, at some of the black players, like targeting mainly the black players on the U.S. team, throwing garbage at them from the stands. So, like, what? Are you serious? Verbal harassment? That's a crime now?
Wow. What's this page, Ernest?
Types of discrimination.
Zoom in on that. Let's see that chart.
Verbal harassment. I'm guessing these the variations, the percent change. So it was a 17.9% increase from 2020 to 2021. For avoidance and shunning, there was a 38% decrease. Also, they're trying to say that in 2021, verbal harassment decreased by 17.9%.
No way.
But the fact was in 2020 that it was at a higher level, 70%, they're saying. Avoidance and shunning in 2020 because of COVID was at 22%, but that changed in 2021 by 38%. And you know what happened in 2021? Biden stepped in office. So I'm guessing this is what they're trying to demonstrate here is that there was an increase. Like, so here they're trying to say physical assault increased when you compare, I guess, what 2020 to 2021. There was a 64% increase. But I mean, looking at the things that we have here, I don't see anything as far as lynching, police killings that were racially motivated.
And even when you look at like the number, so it says plus 90, plus 50, plus 130, it's still less than 10%. So you might have gone for 130%. You've gone from like 2% to 5%.
Yeah, that's a 90% increase. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, come on, bro. This is what you voted for, people. Everybody who voted for Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, this is what you voted for. Every black person who voted for those two, this is what you voted for. Right? What's the numbers for black people?
So we got them talking about this form of discrimination, right? But what we don't have them discussing is the fact when you look at the role of the media.
What's the media showing right here?
This is the Library of Congress. So these are the articles and media content. When you think of media as film, video, web page, books, newspapers, cartoon ads, all of that is media. And if you're looking at the timeline of this country, we can literally go back to 1700 all the way up into 2000. And there's some version of the word nigger and media content, which is racist, which is hate, which shuns, which was meant to do all type of stuff to the
black community. It created an avoidance.
Created all type of avoidance, created redlining. But we don't have an America that's willing to address these facts. We have an America that's willing to say, it's wrong saying the virus came from China and telling them that it was their country that created it. When you got all of this real racism right here.
When you still call it the Spanish flu.
Yeah, they still call it the Spanish flu. But that's what I wanted to show to our audience was that, despite whatever they're saying in the media that helped advance these, Asian hate crimes or this accelerated effort to stop Asian hate, you got to think there hasn't been any significant efforts made by the media or by American politicians to stop the black hate. And that includes racist FBI and police conversations that were recorded in emails. That includes racist posts from the officers who serve us. All of these incidents aren't flagged as hate crimes or as racism, and we don't get any special protections for it. So that's all I wanted to add in there.
I thought we got that anti-lynching bill, man. Thought we had something to protect us from getting lynched, yo. What's up with that?
Hey, anti-lynching bill has been stalled since I heard that it was, other versions of anti-lynching bills introduced there since like the Emmett Till days. But even today in 2019, the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill has not been passed in Congress, despite all of the judicial killings we've seen in 2019, 2020, and 2021. Barack Obama, he had a great chance to sign the executive action into law. If, because he's coming forward nowadays saying that it's, white people don't want to address the racial past, that he couldn't do anything because he was losing support. You couldn't do anything because you were afraid to take action.
Couldn't do anything because he never had any intention to do anything.
Right. That's the difference between an effective leader and an ineffective leader. If you're afraid to take the action, that's it.
so I actually read the AAPI bill. It's like an 8-page document. And so what it does, a lot of what it does, I'm gonna just go over like some of the cliff notes. I'm not trying to go read too much into it, but it creates a uniform crime reporting program. So like it sets up a system where like the attorney general is able to compel states to create like hotlines for reporting hate crimes, and there's a uniform crime reporting program, and the Secretary of State. Yeah. So go to section.
COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act.
Yeah, they couldn't be as specific as they wanted to be with the title because they were trying to really make this an Asian bill, like legit. And so even though it still was made, it was spurred on by whatever was reported as increases of violence against Asian Americans, they had to really water down a lot of the specificity when it came to application of the law, because you'd be essentially making a law for Asians above everybody else, or in spite of everybody else.
Oh, snap. Specificity.
Right. So Kamala, she said she wasn't gonna do nothing only for black people, but go to section 4. So I just want to read guidance. Section 4.
Section 4, guidance.
Guidance for law enforcement agencies. The Attorney General shall issue guidance for state, local, and tribal law enforcement agencies pursuant to this act and other applicable law on how to establish online reporting of hate crimes or incidents and have online reporting that is equally effective for people with disabilities as for people without. Okay. 2, collect data disaggregated by the protected characteristics described in Section 249 of Title 18. 3, expand public education campaigns aimed at raising awareness of hate crimes and reaching victims that are equally effective for people with disabilities and without. Okay. And then go to it should be page 4 on a document.
Okay.
Reading about the grant spaces.
All right, grants. Grants authorized grants for state-run hate crime hotlines. Let's talk.
So, in general, the Attorney General shall make grants to states to create state-run hate crime reporting. Grant period, a grant made under subparagraph A shall be for a period of not more than 5 years. 2, hotline requirements. A state shall ensure with respect to a hotline funded by a grant under paragraph 1 that the hotline directs individuals to 1, a law enforcement, if appropriate. So what happens when it's black people complaining about the law enforcement officers?
Hey, call another cop.
Right, call another cop to call on this cop.
It was a sheriff called the state patrol. It was a state patrol.
That works. That already works.
All right.
Right. Local support services.
I don't know what that is.
Right. Any personally identifiable information that an individual provides to an agency of the state through the hotline is not directly or indirectly disclosed without consent. So supposedly it's supposed to be,
anonymous kind of, or protected information.
Any other agency of the state or any other state, the federal government, any other persons or entity.
You know what that is? You know what that can do? That can protect people who are undocumented.
Right. But what it also will more likely do, we talked about this before with that the executioners gang in LA. Remember that sheriff deputy was trying to report on that gang and they were listening in on his call when he was reporting it to his superiors. So they're going to be listening. They're going to know who you are. They just came out. The FBI had created this black market app for drug dealers and stuff all over the world.
They created like a messenger app.
For like black market.
Like Signal, but it was their own. So it was like this is the most private app you can get in the world.
They's like, go ahead and use this real quick.
And they said they got like 200 arrests or something. Because it was legit. So they thought it was just like, oh yeah, we all using it. So it's the same thing. Like if you go and tell a superior, like you said, in the FBI or in the local police, state police, you don't think they racist? You don't think they got racist people in charge that's gonna listen to your call and say, I'm not busting on my homie?
What the FBI confirmed 2000 and fucking
you talking about that Anon app?
2006,
yeah,
right.
But yeah, in 2006, they confirmed that the white supremacist organizations had infiltrated law enforcement. Infiltrated law enforcement. So what's the
deal? They didn't
say
the FBI, they just said cops, like law
enforcement.
Well,
yeah, they're gonna make sure you're not suspicious of the FBI. But that's all I really wanted to get into with that. But so I looked up the hate crime bill that already exists from like 68 or 66. It should be another PDF link, but it's the it's Title 18, Section 249 of the Hate Crimes Act.
Oh,
and I'm gonna try to go over this pretty quickly too. I don't want to, but this one actually it mentions slavery. It mentions slaves. So this is kind of nice. So at the top, it's going to be, I got to read the lower case. So in general, offenses involving extra or perceived race, color, religion, or national origin, whoever, whether or not acting under color of law, so even if they're law enforcement or politicians or whoever, willfully causes bodily injury to any person or through the use of a firearm, a dangerous weapon, or an explosive or incendiary device attempts to cause bodily injury to any person because of the actual or perceived race, color, religion, or national origin of any person, shall be imprisoned not more than 10 years, fined in accordance with this title, or both, and shall be imprisoned for any term of years or for life, fined in accordance with this title, or both, if deaths result from the offense, or the offense includes kidnapping or an attempt to kidnap, aggravated sexual abuse, an attempt to commit aggravated sexual abuse, or an attempt to kill. And so, like, shouldn't this Tamir Rice situation be handled with this?
This was already in the books,
right?
So
it's already in the books.
See, that's what's interesting. See, that's the thing. People got to really understand this. They say we got to go and get justice. Listen. They're not even applying laws to existing crimes. This is well beyond needing just the laws to be enforced. We need that specificity so we can pull this down like cake.
The legislature writes the laws. The executive branch decides if they want to enforce it or not.
Right. I mean, because if you can find an excuse to justify behavior in every instance, then you'll just find that instance no matter what to justify it, whether it's freedom of speech or whatever, because this is all this stuff is federal crime. Tamir Rice, a federal crime. Alton Sterling, federal crime. Eric Garner, federal crime. Right?
But see, these are talking about the 3 pillars of white supremacy. So despite the law being this, the judicial system and other laws help protect police officers, like immunity and all of that. You get what I'm saying? So
right. So go down and pay. This next one is basically it's rewording the first section I read. It just includes like sexual preference, sexual orientation, gender identity. But it's going to be page 91 of the document. It's called Rules of Construction.
All right, got it. Rule of construction.
Okay, so for purpose of constructing this division, see severability note above. We're not going to look at that. And the amendments made by this division, the following shall apply. In general, nothing in this division shall be construed to allow a court in any criminal trial for an offense described under this division or an amendment made by this division in the absence of a stipulation by the parties to admit evidence of speech, beliefs, association, group membership, or expressive conduct unless that evidence is relevant and admissible under the federal rules of evidence. Nothing in this division is intended to affect the existing rules of evidence. So how...
No, we were on such a roll.
He is doing good, man.
No.
This is tradition. Welcome to the Freeman Media Group. We're doing a brief interlude. We got
a comment. They never enforce the law. They never enforce those hate crimes. No, they don't. They never do. That's what's going on, man.
Violent acts motivated.
Man. So I mean, go ahead.
Seemed like Stedman was finna get into it too. He probably still going.
You don't even realize he got disconnected. Oh, geez.
Yeah.
But look, though, this is the thing, right? The specificity, the need for these policies and protections, they went in and they tried to go as hard in the paint as they could for the Asian hate crime bill, right? But now they had to back it off a little bit. They call it the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act or whatever. But, you know, the same stuff could have been done for us. They could have replaced a bunch of this stuff with black people and been good. We could have had a nice, solid start. And it's funny because Asians ain't even protesting in the street like we are. And y'all like,
We march for George Floyd. That's what all the minorities telling black people nowadays. Like that's enough to be a ally, or if that's the main plight of our issues.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, listen. I think we should go ahead and kind of start to wrap up, because I think we got the point across, Law. Because the media is the engine that makes things possible, unfortunately, and that also means they can make other things impossible. And when you are a group or a caste, as in America's unspoken caste system, when you are in a position where you can't even begin to own an influential level of media, let alone control it, this is what can happen. You can have all sorts of stuff pass you by in the middle of the day for all sorts of reasons, whether they be truly bona fide and well-rooted and driven data, or they just be fly-by-night stuff that somebody wanted. This can turn into essentially...
The hate crime bill said all of those things, and it's no bombing, no burning, all of these things we know some group did to some other group. And they haven't given any justice. I mean, if you're looking at Tulsa, Rosewood, Elaine, Arkansas, they fit the bill for that. But, they let these white people die off rather than take them in and get justice. Same with Emmett Till's case, where the woman came forward in her deathbed and said she lied. So, this is the world we live in. People complaining about hate, but I don't think they understand what it really is and how deep it could get.
So on that note, I think we can take a pivot toward Tulsa and talk about Tulsa for a quick second. But I think you got to understand that we are moving into the last segment of our show, y'all. Your mans and them.
You are listening to Your Mans and Them. This your mans? Hey, yo, who mans is this?
Mans is this? I need to know. I really need to know.
Oh, who that?
Yeah.
It wouldn't be the Freeman's Collective if I wasn't kicked off at least once. And it was going so smooth, I just knew it was coming.
It was, man. It was real smooth. But listen. They, as usual, they is listening. And our boy Biden, he been talking too much as usual, saying some stuff that don't support what we need to get done out here in these streets. And what's this on the screen? Biden privately tells lawmakers not to expect much on reparations legislation.
Yeah, so right now, as the bill stands, it's currently queued up and ready to be introduced to the floor. But right now, Democrats don't believe they have enough support. I think Sheila Jackson Lee, with her being the senior of this bill and her picking up where John Conyers left off, she's trying to, I guess, gather as much support as she can. But a lot of Black folks are feeling that, this thing might not get passed, despite the Democrats having control of both the House and the Senate, and despite the fact that we got a Democratic president. So with Joe Biden, I know a lot of you guys can go through and find clips of him speaking on reparations. Yeah, it looks like he's as he stated before, he's open to studying reparations, but he's also stated things about the immigrants, etc. I think in this article here, in a private meeting, he told, private lawmakers that they shouldn't expect much on HR 40, which indicates that, he's not necessarily taking this big political issue for us seriously. And that's despite the fact that he went to commemorate, the Tulsa massacre and tried to shed light on that. But he's had 56 years as a politician to do this. And this is his first real, recognition of this thing that we got here in this Tulsa situation. When he was friends with Strom Thurmond, he didn't come forward and bring up Tulsa. He didn't mention Black justice. He didn't mention Elaine, Arkansas. He didn't mention reparations. So we already know how he truly feels about it. I think, I don't know if this article was supposed to become public, but I think maybe somebody in Congress leaked it just to put pressure on him.
You know what? And let me read this for the people. The top of this says Joe Biden was more blunt about racism than perhaps any president before him, and then many in the crowd expected. In his remarks commemorating 100 years since the Tulsa Race Massacre Tuesday.
And read what he put below that, Darvell.
What's that?
Read what he put below that, because we're talking about Asian hate crime, right?
Right. So this quote below this is, he called out how through the years there have been members in elected office who were very public about their association or membership with the KKK. Representative Cori Bush said in the parking lot of the Greenwood Cultural Center. He set up the scene in his speech to take us into what was happening at that time. And that was really powerful. I was so glad to hear it. I'm so disappointed in this quote from Cori. I really wish they had
Freshman, new member of the Fraud Squad. New member of the Fraud Squad.
Oh my goodness. So this is the thing. They said some attendees noted what they considered a glaring omission during Biden's speech, right? There were no mentions of reparations for the survivors of the massacre and their descendants, some of who have sued the city and the state for compensation, and a full-throated endorsement of H.R. 40, which would create a commission to study reparations. The bill passed out of the House Judiciary Committee back in April for the first time since it was first introduced in 1989. Listen, our failure is so architected by even the current politicians in office that they let bills sit in a committee for 20 years,
32
years, 32 years. Y'all
and see,
don't hit that.
Like what you was about to say, our whatever the word you just used is so integral to the system that they just keep us perpetuated on the bottom. Like that's like Gerard is saying, Joe Biden in the comments, he said Joe Biden can easily just create this commission on his own. He don't need congressional permission or none of that. Yeah. But he don't want to do that. You see what I'm saying? He doesn't want to do it. He don't want to alienate all the people who put him in office that don't like black people or that don't think black people deserve justice. Because that's what it boils down to. It's not reparations. It's justice, right? Yeah. You know, it's justice. It's the same as if you run your car into my car and I don't have any way to get any type of justice for that. That's what he don't support justice. None of these people who in Congress who aren't every day screaming and yelling about the fact that reparations haven't passed. They don't want justice. None of them. They don't want justice.
And you know what, though?
The reason why they don't want justice is because they're afraid of that white backlash. And that's tied to the media.
Yeah. I mean, the media is what brings it home, right? Because the media is who put all those people on the steps of Trump's, speech and led to that entire Russia, the Capitol building. Because, I mean, it takes inflation of it takes inflation of people through the media in order to get them that pumped up to be willing to do that. But even with that being said, Representative Brenda Lawrence, one of our representatives from Michigan, said that Biden didn't disagree with what we were doing in terms of H.R. 40. Biden doesn't disagree with H.R. 40, but he did talk about his plate being real full right now, trying to get the infrastructure bill passed. And all he really wants to do right now is make sure he gets that through before he takes on anything else. There's always an excuse. The infrastructure in this country is falling apart because of the architecture this country operates on. The capitalistic, monopolistic mindset of every individual who participates in the leadership or the ownership class and also has their hands around every puppet in government is why the infrastructure is falling apart. It doesn't take PhDs to realize you got to repair roads and bridges, but it does take PhDs to be listened to outside of the scope of the White House or media's establishment saying things. It takes a lot of PhDs. It takes a lot of people who have a few degrees behind them to get people to start to listen if they don't have the media on their side. So anyway, Lawrence is, I don't know. Brendan Lawrence, I don't know. H.R. 40. Take it, Ernest. I don't know.
Hey, no, I mean, this is the situation we in. I mean, after so many failed administrations, I mean, we at this point, what policies have been specifically passed to repair the past? You know what I'm saying? And that's the problem with affirmative action, right? Like it was something that was meant to be compensatory, and ultimately it wasn't because it was generalized and made available to all people. I think as it relates to like Black justice, or Black repair, we got to be real specific, like we've already been doing throughout this show, and most reparations around the country are currently doing. But at the same time, we do have to confront the media, and we also have to make sure that we get involved locally in all of these politics so that our voices are heard. At this point, I think they understand where we're coming from, and I think they know what we want. But again, these are just political ploys. It ain't nothing that we ain't seen before. I mean, Obama had his excuses, and now Biden has his. Ultimately, the Democratic Party is failing to deliver. If there was ever a time to show Black people that you had their backs, knowing that this bill that we've waited on for 32 years haven't been passed, this would be the moment. But if you drop this moment, then we got to hold you to task. We got to go talk to my grandma, my mom, all of these people. And by 2022 and 2023 and 2024, we will be voting something else. We don't know if that'll necessarily put a dent in the numbers, but it will have an effect for sure. So that's where we at.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's where we at. And I think we're about to be at the end of our show today. But we got one other thing we're supposed to talk about, though. Biden's still talking. And when he talk, he say stuff he ain't supposed to say.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's appropriate. Sometimes it's not.
Most times it ain't. Most times it ain't.
Most times it's not. Well, I gave him too much credit. So I want the audience to hear this. And y'all tell us, what if this was appropriate. It's our boy Biden. He's at the Virginia military base, and this is just a 47-second clip. And then we're gonna try and see what's going on after I play it. Oh, wait a minute. You know what? I apologize, y'all. Y'all couldn't hear that. You know why? Because I don't know what I'm doing, and I apologize. Let's try it again, huh? Let's go. Oh, and I should mute.
I'm honored to be joined today by Governor Northam and by two great representatives of the Commonwealth, Congressman Laurie and Congressman Scott. And I want to thank you for all that you do to represent these service veterans, because they're devoted to you. The family members, the caregivers, survivors will call Virginia home. I'm especially honored to share the stage with Brittany and Jordan and Nathan and Margaret Catherine. I love those barrettes in her hair, man. I tell you what, look at her. She looks like she's 19 years old, sitting there with her, like a little lady with her legs crossed. Brittany, you're doing triple duty as a veteran.
Whose man's is that, man?
That girl was 11, bro. What is you looking at her legs crossed? What are you looking at her for, cuz? What are you doing, bro? She's 11, dog. Just stop, bro. Just stop. I don't get it. Just stop.
He was stumbling through some of the stuff he was saying up until he wanted to go freelance on that little girl. And then he was like, "Oh, look at that. That looks really tasty." I'm just saying that's what it sounded like. So we voted. I mean, y'all, they voted him in, man. I don't know. We told folks not to.
Somebody did, or whatever. Hey, I don't know if I could. Let me read those findings, just because it mentions slavery. I got cut out. Let me read those findings from the actual hate crime law that already existed. I really want to try to get this quick. I promise. So the incidence of violence motivated by the actual or perceived race, color, religion, national origin, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability of the victim poses a serious national problem. Such violence disrupts the tranquility and safety of communities and is deeply divisive. State and local authorities are now and will continue to be responsible for prosecuting the overwhelming majority of violent crimes in the United States, including violent crimes motivated by bias. These authorities can carry out their responsibilities more effectively with greater federal assistance. Existing federal law is inadequate to address this problem. A prominent characteristic of violent crime motivated by bias is that it devastates not just the actual victim and the family and friends of the victim, but frequently savages the community sharing the traits that caused the victim to be selected. Such violence substantially affects the interstate commerce in many ways, including the following. The movement of members of targeted groups is impeded, and members of such groups are forced to move across state lines to escape incidents of risk and such violence. So who are they talking about? Us. Members of targeted groups are prevented from purchasing goods and services, obtaining or sustaining employment, or participating in other commercial activities. Perpetrators cross state lines to commit such violence. Channels, facilities, and instrumentalities of interstate commerce are used to facilitate the commission of such violence. Such violence is committed using articles that have traveled in interstate commerce. For generations, the institution of slavery and involuntary servitude were defined by race, color, and ancestry of those held in bondage. Slavery and involuntary servitude were enforced both and after the adoption of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States through widespread public and private violence directed at persons, race, color, or ancestry. Accordingly, eliminating racially motivated violence is an important means of eliminating, to the extent possible, the badges, incidents, and relics of slavery and involuntary servitude, both at the time when the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution of the United States were adopted, and continuing to date, members of certain religious and national origin groups were and are perceived to be distinct races. Thus, in order to eliminate to the extent possible the badges, incidents, so it just kind of repeats. But so they mention us. You see what I'm saying? They mention us specifically. They mention our condition specifically with this law. They mention a great migration, having to leave where you come from to cross state lines. And I talked about my a friend of my father's from Mississippi who had to move to Chicago after getting paid 11 cents, working sun up to sundown. And they still don't have a way to enact these laws to benefit us. We still got to come out hat in hand, begging to be respected. We got to stand up. We got to try to fight and make sure people know these laws exist. We don't need no new law. We need you to get some new courage. These laws exist. They mention slaves. They mention us. They were made for us. And they're not being enacted. They're not being used.
Hey, I was gonna say the fact you mentioned that part, that just shows you that they got the correct wording to use for us for these justice claims. Like, it doesn't have to be African; it could just say ancestry descended from slavery, as they specifically just eloquently stated in this line. But I just copied that. That's going on. To the grapevine for sure. So
definitely, man. Sometimes they leak the good stuff, trying to make bad stuff for somebody else. Interesting. Well, yeah, thank you for that, Stead. I think that's important for people to see. Check that out, understand those findings, and you'll see, just as Ernest said, this is not anything new. This is not something that people don't know how to do. We talk about reparations, we talk about restorative justice, reparative justice, transformative justice. When we talk about this, we have to realize that when I say the Black community will never catch up and be competitive without reparations, I don't even have to convince you of that. White America, and they ain't worried about us being competitive, so they ain't worried about getting us reparations. They ain't trying to see that, because like we just spoke about, the media being the important and powerful arm it is. If we got enough money, we'd have our own media. We might not listen to the establishment anymore, you know? And so that can undercut a lot of the progress of the country, because listen, this country's been built on our back. The moment we get unified around our own media apparatus, oh my gosh, ain't no telling.
Right.
Ain't no telling. So, hey, that's it for us today. I really appreciate everyone calling in, or not calling in, but getting on the show with us today. Tuning in, hitting that button on YouTube. Again, if you're watching us from Facebook, go to our YouTube channel, The Freedman Collective. Go there, subscribe to the channel, start following us, share the videos, and get in the comment section. We show the comments on the show live. And we're going to have a special treat next week. We can't say what it is yet, or not next week, but the next show in 2 weeks from now, right? We can't say what it is yet, but it'll be more interactive, easier for people to plug in their comments, questions, and concerns, and, you know, shoot the cheese with us as we try to work through these issues for the public. So I'm going to leave it up to Stedman and then Ernest to close us out. Stedman, you got any last words for the people?
Yeah, man, I appreciate y'all giving me that extra time to get over that piece. I really wanted to get that out. I hope that, the information we provided was useful, it's beneficial, it's informative, and I hope that we can continue to build on past shows, past information, to enable all of you watching and anybody who we share this with, and embolden you to stand up for truth, justice, and righteousness. Freedom is not free, and it takes a cost, and so we dedicate our time every other Tuesday to bring you as much information as we can to try to help to conscript more people in this fight for freedom. And so thanks for listening.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. As always, I want to thank you guys for listening. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you comment if you got anything you want to say. As Gerard always says, Adolph J. Rocky, we have no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. And so in that vein, I think our interest as Black people is getting from underneath the boot. And the only way we can do that is by fighting for the policies that's going to make that boot move. And like Stedman said, we really don't even need the new policies. We need to just fight for the ones we got, get them there, and enforce them. But we really do need reparations on top of that. So I think that's the fight going forward. And if that's your passion, definitely feel free to join us. If you got out there and march for Black Lives Matter, I can guarantee you we can give you some work that'll be more relevant to your people. So
more relevant and will actually make a bigger difference right away.
Mm-hmm. So with that being said, thank you guys for hanging out with us today, and looking forward to catching up with you the next show.
Peace.